everyone. Welcome to another episode of Science Talk. As you know, on this channel, we talk about health, climate science, and technology and bring more experts, policymakers, authors, and communicators and commentators, people who really care about this planet and care about the environment, care about developing technologies which are good for humans. So today's episode, we're going to talk about climate change. As you know, there's a lot of talk on phasing out from fossil fuel for legitimate reasons. And also, one of the most mentioned concern is whenever we talk about climate change or solving climate change problem is energy dependence or energy efficiency. And recently, I have been receiving a lot of comments on my videos from different people from, red and blue, and it's a very partisan issue in the US and many other parts of the globe. So today we are tackling that issue that when we talk about climate change and we talk about our energy, like how are we going to produce energy and are we able to watch our TVs or no? Questions like that, and why not nuclear energy instead of renewable energy? And some people don't like windmills because they kill whales, as you know, today's episode, my guest is Dr. Paul Dorfman. He is a renowned professor, scientist, and he does a lot of work on nuclear energy and its related risks in the US, UK, and many other countries. So, Dr. Paul, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my first very overarching question is what the heck is going on with nuclear energy these days?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of nuclear, there's a few awkward facts that intrude. So last year, the world added a record 582 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. That's about 92% of all new power additions worldwide last year, with nuclear nowhere. So the fact remains that each year, nuclear adds about as much net global power capacity as renewables add every 2 days. So if you want to look at the facts, if there's anyone who wants to be fact-based about this, that's essentially what's happening. The key problems of this: nuclear costs, so building new nuclear, it's enormously expensive, and significant delays are the norm. They just happen with all new nuclear. It just always happens. So the result is actually sort of counterintuitively and counter to all this discussion about how nuclear will save us from climate. Nuclear faces the same problems as fossil fuel. So uncompetitive costs, stranded assets, and a polluting legacy, and unrivaled competition from renewables.
That's a great actually point that it is very costly and the problems are the same as with the fossil fuel. So now, as you just said that and we have also seen Amber Report and other reports that not nuclear but renewable energy is super cheap. It's never been that cheap. Why not we go with that option? Why you think you're in Europe, I'm in the US? I think we probably know the reasons, but for the audience, why Europe and US still pushing for non-renewable energy sources?
It's actually quite difficult to really get to grips with this. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, AR6, reports that renewables are now 10 times more efficient than new nuclear at CO2 mitigation. So if you're worried about climate, the very last thing that you want to consider is new nuclear. So it's difficult to understand why, to a certain extent. I mean, there are certain explanations. The explanations are that there's a link between new nuclear power and nuclear weapons. And therefore there's a need for the two to be sort of entwined. And the French President Macron is quite clear about this. He makes that that link very, very clear. But in fact, that's not really the end of the story. I mean, even if one wanted to in this dangerous world, with Putin having the bomb, if one wanted to have a military nuclear weapons defense, you could ring fence that spending, and it would be much cheaper than continuing with new nuclear. New nuclear is vastly, vastly, vastly expensive, and about 5 to 6 to 7 times more expensive than renewables. The market, the finance market, has fled new nuclear. The finance market won't touch nuclear with a barge pole. It's only when government subsidies, vast subsidies by various sort of, interesting sort of fiscal mechanisms, come in to assure the market that the public purse will take the hit for these costs, that the market is sort of slightly tempted back into new nuclear. So in real terms, it's actually quite difficult to understand why new nuclear. I mean, one of the explanations is people have just woken up to climate change. Gosh, climate change is here, whereas, people like me and other people have been shouting about this for 30, 40 years. And there's this idea of, oh, I know what, we can resolve all our climate problems with nuclear. Unfortunately, nuclear will be one of the most significant climate casualties. Nuclear is based by the coast or by inland rivers. We know and the reason for this is that nuclear needs very significant cooling for the reactors and for the spent fuel and spent fuel ponds. So it needs to take in lots of water to cool these very hot systems. And so therefore it's sited by the coast or by inland rivers or lakes. Now, the problem is, we know the problem is, and we can look at the models, what will happen to our coasts. But more importantly, there's a thing called storm surge, which is basically when certain atmospheric conditions meet high tide, the sea basically ups and moves inland. And you can credibly predict that the majority of the current and potentially future nuclear plants by the coast will be at significant flood risk from storm surge-driven, climate-driven, sea level rise-driven flooding. Inland, they have different problems. Like in France, France has started to shut down nuclear during the summer because the rivers become too hot or too low flow. And at the moment, the question is, it's slightly more complex than sort of actually taking in the heated water. The French nuclear was not allowed to discharge this heated water that it used to cool down the reactors and spent fuel pond, because basically it would kill the receiving river waters. So basically, at the end of the day, you can comfortably predict that both coastal and inland nuclear will be significant climate casualties. So even if the discussion is, oh, well, nuclear will save us from climate, by the simple facts of the matter, that's not the case. But perhaps, people are more concerned about money these days than other kinds of issues. The key issue about nuclear is that it's not only, it's very, very costly. So therefore, there's things called, so if you spend all this money on nuclear, you won't be able to spend the money on the things that we know we can do here and now. And also the other key thing about nuclear is it's very late. Now, the UK government published a report a couple of years ago, which is, good research, which states quite clearly that on average, new nuclear takes up to 17 years for one nuclear power station, from planning to approvals, to regulation, to construct. That's about 17 years. And on average, it takes about 10 years to construct just one nuclear power station. So, given the fact that we are now in the middle of a climate crisis and we need to act now, absolutely now, to avert the worst, the unfortunate truth is, whether you like nuclear or whether you don't like nuclear is much too late for the climate crisis. The third thing about nuclear is people say, well, what about a thing called Dunkelflaut? Well, Dunkelflaut is a German word for what happens if you have low wind and low sun at the same time. Yeah, and basically renewables, so the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. Even for the couple of 100 hours per year of Dunkelflaut, low wind, low sun, it's entirely possible to sustain a reliable power system by expanding renewables of all kinds. So you're talking about hydro, you're talking about wind, you're talking about geothermal, you're talking about solar, you're talking about rapid growth and modernization of the electricity grid, fast interconnection, energy efficiency, energy management, and cost-effective storage technology. And at a pinch, just in terms of transition, for those peak, 100 hours per year, fire up a very, very limited quantity of CCGT, combined cycle gas technology, just to fill in this very small peak when you won't have that cover. Even if you were concerned about when the wind doesn't blow and when the wind doesn't shine, that doesn't work out. And one of the main reasons why that doesn't work out is that nuclear is very bad at what's called load follow. In other words, switching on and switching off, switching on and switching off to cover the variability of renewables. What nuclear likes to do is switch on and run.
Yeah.
It can switch off quickly in terms of emergency, but then, that's another issue altogether. To actually do proper load follow, okay, to really sort of back up, as it were, renewables, it's incredibly inefficient and incredibly expensive at doing that for all these kinds of reasons. So if you go back to your question, why nuclear? Well, people all of a sudden have woken up to climate. There's this link between weapons and civil.
Yeah.
And also there's a vast, huge lobby for nuclear. I mean, there's an industry to lobby for nuclear to politicians. And it has to be said, politicians don't quite grasp the reality of what nuclear really means.
Which is a good thing. Keeping in mind the facts you're just describing, it's a good thing that these politicians do not fully understand the way they understand the probably fossil fuel industry, the coal and gas and oil, and take hundreds of millions of dollars to their campaigns and then lobby for them, or do the legislation, uh, or to do the propaganda that, oh, we can't live without fossil fuel. So I think the question here, to address climate change, is energy a good way to start? Like, do we have to start our conversation more, aggressively on how we phase out from fossil fuel, or look at more alternative energy sources, or do we have to look somewhere else to start? Or do you think it's a good start and it's a big conversation and we need to have that conversation, that let's start from energy first?
Well, energy is one way in.
Hmm?
Health is another way in. The environment is another way in. The insurance you pay for your house is another way in. Food is another way in.
Mm.
All of these issues, sort of joined in a sort of joined up way, will be severely impacted by climate, an extraordinary extent.
Mhm.
But if one were to look towards energy, which is a very good way in, then yes, it's clear what the trajectory is. As I said, in fact, it's about 92.5% of all new power capacity additions for generation worldwide last year. New power last year was renewables, with nuclear nowhere, absolutely, practically nowhere. So there is a trajectory here. I mean, there is basically what is going on and what is not going on. What is actually going on is the renewable evolution. I mean, that's simply what's happening. And the beauty of it is that it's fast, it's quick,
Yeah.
it's significantly less expensive than nuclear. And in the last few months, we've learnt that new renewables is lower cost than new coal. So even in terms of the economics between renewables and coal, renewables win. So if we are to ameliorate climate, we won't be able to stop climate. I mean,
Yeah.
things will happen.
Mm.
There will be impacts on our food supply. We won't be able to get insurance from houses by the coast or by inland rivers. People will see this, in their everyday lives, and certainly worldwide in places like Bangladesh or
Mhm.
Thailand, or in other places there will be, the Netherlands, there will be significant impacts. So we can't just sort of carry on doing this. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a kind of a death cult.
Mhm.
Coal and fossil fuel and oil is a kind of a death cult. We'll stuff up the world. So we have to electrify. I mean, we
Yeah.
have no choice. We must do this.
So, and I think I wanted to also ask if it's cheap, it's efficient. You can also store it like California is doing it. Like California is almost 100% renewable, and they do store that energy if in just in cases if they're producing too much, or like they predict that there's gonna be low wind or no sunshine for days or weeks or for long hours. But if it's cheap, is it creating jobs? Because whenever you talk about renewable, talk about fossil fuel, one of the biggest arguments is that, oh, where are the jobs? We need jobs, right? So how do we put food on the table? Coal, gas, oil, these companies have been employing people for decades, right? Hundreds of years. And now all of a sudden I've been hearing somebody that they are laying off people, but they're making more money. These fossil fuel companies are rich than ever before. They have less people working for them. But like, where do you see economics of these renewable energies? Like, do they produce jobs, and how we keep those people or transition those people who used to work in the coal industry? Look at West Virginia, or other places which have like literally gone worst ever. Like in one of the counties in West Virginia, the average household income is 20,000 US dollars a year, which is terrible, right? So like, how do you like not only advocate for renewable? I'm all for renewable, but like, where do you put those people, and how do you like talk with them about economics of renewable energy?
Yeah, there's no question but that it is a fact that there are significantly more jobs in renewables than there is in coal or nuclear or any of the other, other systems that one can imagine. There's enormous work that needs to be done on energy efficiency,
Mhm.
on energy management. There's huge work that needs to be done on all the other forms of renewables. There's vast work that needs to be done on grid upgrade. Grid, in other words, how you throw power across distance, in terms of pylons and the rest of it. That's both within a nation state and also between nation states. So there's a huge amount of work to be done, and there's a huge amount of jobs. What's happened is that the unions are, at the moment, as you described, locked into the kind of jobs that we have had in
Mhm.
terms of coal and gas and oil and nuclear,
Yeah.
and people are locked into that,
Mhm.
and many are, as you say, not well paid at all,
Mhm.
whilst the profits are taken in by the large corporations. All that is true.
Mhm.
So what must happen, what has to happen, is that politicians have to get wise, and to a certain extent, we've started to see that there has to be transition
Yeah.
of these jobs, and there has to be a ways
Mhm.
that poor or middle-income families, workers, must be able to transition from one form of energy and power production to another. And of course, we've seen this in the past, from horses to cars, or from canals to railways, from and the rest of it. So we've seen these transitions happen in the past, and things do change and will always change. The thing about the renewable evolution is that it will really change the way that we do things.
Mhm.
It will also change the way that we relate to the environment, because when we know that when we switch on that light, or when we turn on that car, or when we turn on our cooker,
Mhm.
power that we get is not coming from something that is destroying our planet. Now, this will change the way that our emotional relationship with the environment, but also it'll change the way we relate to each other. At the moment, we are locked into a system that is, I'm sorry to say, killing us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as because if we would talk about climate change, it's a very complex, big topic, right? It attached everything, and as you earlier said in the beginning, agriculture to food to oceans to sea level, droughts, and everything we consume. And one of the arguments is, which I think has a huge potential, and we're not talking about, is the word increasing population, right? It's like the world population keep increasing, and the demand, it's a demand and supply kind of thing too. That like as more people on this planet, there of course gonna be more consumption of things. So how do we tackle away from energy where the conversation needs to happen, or what conversations do we need to have when we talk about climate change, especially in population perspective?
It's not my field, it's not my area, so I'm not expert on that aspect of it. It does seem clear that um, if everyone were to try to have the same sort of lifestyle as we in France or in my home country of the UK, or in America, Germany, Italy, Europe, OECD countries, if everyone in the world would have the same standard of living,
Mhm.
then the world would just couldn't cope. Basically, I mean, we would be it'd be a world-ending kind of thing, basically. So, in a sense, what everybody has to understand is that overconsumption of goods is taking away the future of our children,
Mhm.
our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. So we might say, well, we expect this quality of life, we expect the standard of living, we expect to have, whatever it is, a stable population.
Mhm.
Unless we change the systemically, unless we change the way we are doing things, our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren will suffer.
Pay the
Now,
price. They will pay the bills. Yeah,
no question,
and
no
then I
question.
think,
In
yeah,
terms
but
of population, which is your question,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't want to particularly pontificate about population, but there have been issues about, well, there's questions of if you have a secure social security system and that you will be assured that you'll be taken care of in old age, or your family will be taken care of old age, then you don't need to have so many children to support you in old age. And there are other sort of forms of sort of switching from one form of population model to another. However, also, if one looks at kinds of populations as well too, for example, in the UK, there's this sort of issue about immigration and the rest of it. If you look at the actual facts of population, we seem to be in Europe at least, we're having a declining population. So without immigration, we wouldn't be able to maintain our standard of living. We wouldn't have enough young people, as it were, to support our aging population. So population is a very complex issue. And we know that with climate, we will probably see, and we're already starting to see, movements
Mhm.
of population
Yes,
from areas. And I
yes.
don't have the solutions to that, except to say that basically we'll all live together or die together.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, yeah, as I recently interviewed Dr. Peter Kalmus, and he said that our generation, the way he describes as an analogy, we are having a party, but our grandkids and kids are going to pay the bills. So we're gonna enjoy this lifestyle and everything, but the price is going to be paid our children and our generations, future generations. So now shift gears a little bit to artificial intelligence. Um, are you personally excited, terrified? What do you think about artificial intelligence, and like how rapidly it is growing and developing and changing things around us?
AI is critically important, and everyone's sort of very aware of what that means and what that implies for jobs, what that implies for all different kinds of things. It's a huge topic. So this brave new world of AI. Uh, Now, the International Energy Agency, which is sort of the renowned
Yeah, I
organization on
yeah,
energy, hopes data centers to cause a tenth of global demand electricity to 2030. And that's just to 2030. Well, not
within
just,
5 years. Wow.
in 5 years. Okay. Um, but that's only doubling its share
Hmm.
at the moment to about maybe 3%. So we're already here with AI. Now, IEA forecasts renewables can power data center growth 10 to 20 times over. with Bloomberg, NEF, which is sort of another sort of energy research organization, predicting 100-fold renewables expansion.
Mm.
So if one were to look at how we can, if we are to go with, no doubt AI will happen, the renewable evolution can cope with this. Both by predictions from the International Energy Agency and by Bloom and the market, okay, and the market. In terms of nuclear, people are saying, well, Google or Microsoft, whoever it is, they're going nuclear because of AI. As discussed, nuclear takes what? Up to 17 years to put down? One station, just one station. And in terms of the current nuclear, it's an aging fleet. France is, which is nuclear par excellence. France will have to spend mandatory. Its regulators say it's mandatory, it must spend up to 100 billion euros just to upgrade its current nuclear fleet, just to keep it running just a little bit longer. So whether you want to talk about current nuclear or new nuclear in terms of AI, nuclear won't do it. And as discussed, it will be renewables that will do it. Now, whether AI is a good thing or a bad thing, that's another question entirely. And I'm not going to pontificate about it.
So, because we had Stephen Chu, who's a Nobel laureate, recently talking about energy and data centers, and showing that your electricity bill is going to go up because of these data centers. And I think New York Times put a report out recently, pinpointing where the data centers are right now. And of course, majority, like a huge majority, like 90% of them are in the global north. And to a certain extent, I mean, logistically, it makes sense because these are energy efficient countries, meaning you don't have a power outages as often as India or, other parts of the world or Africa or many other countries. But they're going to go more in the south as well. So, I sometimes I'm not a big fan of artificial intelligence, especially like these big tech giants who are strongly lobbying and throwing hundreds of billions of dollars to our president, in the U.S. to say that, oh, we are investing $500 billion, and they know he loves billions and billions and billions, right? So like that's the one way to kind of how the oligarchy and how the power, how you kind of consolidate more power, because you have a fame, you have a money, and what you need power, right? So for that point of view, I'm not a fan because in the early 2000s, I was too young, but we had a huge celebrations about social media. It's going to revolutionize the world. It did, but in a many negative ways too, right? So we got a lot of conspiracy theories, misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, lies, fake information all the time. And now with AI, it's super difficult to see what is real, what is fake. And even many of the times, our own president is, sharing fake video generated by AI knowingly or unknowingly. So that's like kind of my take, that I do I maybe it's good for, like, detecting diseases, it's good for predicting climate and other weather patterns, it will help us, but on the other hand it also gonna bring a lot of challenges. So it's maybe a trade-off, what as a society. And I don't know if it's a society drives the change, or it's like always the big companies, or these people drive the change.
One of the issues here is SMRs, small modular nuclear reactors. And there's this idea that SMRs will be able to power AI or are the kind of the future in terms of nuclear. Again, awkward facts remain. The uncomfortable truth is that SMR designs are a long way away. I mean, a decade or two away. I mean, they're all in development. And the fact is, they would be more expensive than large reactors per kilowatt hour. And per kilowatt hour, power per kilowatt hour, that's the key parameter. That's really, how you judge the money. And the former chair of the US government Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, has written a paper which says that SMRs will produce more chemically and physically reactive waste than large reactors. So more radioactive waste than large reactors. So there's a problem with AI and the dream, the dream of AI and the dream of SMRs. Oh, this is what's going to happen in the future. The fact is, there are no commercially operating SMRs in the world. They don't exist. SMRs are all in development. And that development will be what, 10 years, 12 years, 13, 14 years? And maybe, even if you gung-ho for SMRs, you'll see the first produced maybe in, I don't know, 15 years or so. Again, far too late for AI and far too late for climate. So what we're seeing are these sort of imaginaries, these bubbles, basically, which, AI will change the world, which AI will have an impact on our world. And there will be some good things and there will be some bad things. Or nuclear is a solution to our problems. But these are essentially imaginaries. These are not realities. These are not things that are actually real or provable. So, and it's very difficult, as you discussed, to work, to live, especially where you are, within systems that start to kind of believe in superstition, believe in sort of nonsense, basically, and don't believe in facts, and don't actually believe in science. And so it's actually quite difficult to negotiate this very difficult pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of right now, I mean, like U.S. is by far becoming worst in terms of climate change. We're seeing floods, we're seeing wildfires, we're seeing droughts in the Midwest, and the predictions are pretty scary at this point. And we are reversing everything, with the rapid speed. We don't want to hear about anything about EPA. We don't want the industry to report air pollution standards and all that kind of things. On the other hand, we're also not kind of doing anything, reversing and drill baby drill kind of thing. Where is Europe? Like, is Europe, you think, is better off right now addressing climate change and thinking about adopting, mitigating the risks we are going to see in next 10 to 15 to 20 years?
It's clear, obviously, more or less everywhere except the US, understands the reality of the world we live in. And so clearly Europe is adopting, bit by bit by bit, relatively significant climate adaptation systems, and also thinking very clearly about energy production systems, and also energy storage systems, and also energy transport systems, grid, basically, the grid upgrade, how you throw power across distance. And also, if you want to look at the champion in terms of new renewables, it has to be China. So China is producing far and away more renewables than the rest of the world put together. Saying that, China is still a huge amount of coal,
Yes,
without any question. But we're getting to the point in which, even in China, renewables are just about to beat coal. Just about to beat coal. So the other issue around China is that basically China produces stuff for the world market. So, okay, China is producing all of this stuff and is burning all this energy, but also a lot of this goes to the world market to consume. So consumption of this stuff is really important to look at. So, but going back to your question, yes, I mean, it's awful to say, but I'm sorry to say, but the rest of the world is laughing at the US. It's appalling. I mean, and that's not simply sort of Greenpeace or people like that. You're talking about governments, regulators, policymakers simply cannot understand how America has got itself in this terrible situation. And it's a very, very depressing. It's a very, very depressing reality that whereas America was once
Mhm.
a secure ally
Mhm.
for OECD countries, for all of the countries that, that had us,
Yeah,
democratic.
democratically, like who
Very
believes in
simple,
science
very
and development and technology and leading the world in those things.
exactly
Yeah,
bog standard democracy.
yeah, absolutely.
Now everybody's looking at America with disbelief
Yeah,
and horror
yeah.
about the kind of things that we're seeing
Mhm.
in America. And unfortunately, this does smack of other authoritarian regimes that have happened in the
Absolutely.
past.
Absolutely. So, so one last few small questions. Are you more of a climate optimist, a depressed, or a doomer, or where do you where do you see yourself? Are we too late or not too late? Like, what do you think on that? Because there are a lot of people who think like I'm fully depressed. I don't have any hopes left. I don't think anybody can do anything, and they don't. It's not like they cannot. They don't want to. And some people say like, oh, I'm a absolutely climate doomer. Overall, ecological disaster is happening, and we're going down. And there are some people like, oh no, I'm a climate optimist. I think we still can do, and we're still doing, and something is better than nothing, and we're still not too late. Where do you stand?
I think one has to be a climate realist.
Hmm.
I mean, there's no point in giving up.
Hmm.
That means giving up on our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren. I mean, there is no point in doing that.
Hmm.
Also, in terms of where we actually are,
Hmm.
okay, just this year we have hit the moment where new renewables are greater than new coal, where new renewables are cheaper than coal, where 92.5% of all new power capacity additions last year was renewable. Um, so there is great hope in the renewable evolution, and it's something, in all this morass that we find ourselves in, that is something really to hold on to. On the other hand, there's no question about it. I mean, people like me have been shouting about climate for 30 years or so, and I'm just vaguely relieved, actually, at the moment that people are actually beginning to take it seriously. Before, people would always sort of, well, we're just going to carry on doing what we're doing and what the hell kind of thing. So, in a sense, we are locked. One has to be realistic.
Hmm.
We are locked into climate change. We are
Absolutely.
locked in.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
It will happen. So one needs to be realistic. What's important is about working to not have the worst, to ameliorate
Hmm.
the worst consequences, because the worst consequences are very bad. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very serious
Yeah.
situation, actually, and must be taken very seriously by all of us.
And it's
So,
not a future; it's just happening now.
oh yeah, I mean, it's clearly happening. It was happening some time ago. If you're looking at the temperature gauge, so it clearly is happening now, and will happen more so in the future. At the moment, it's sort of just about doable to cope with it, but that won't be the case for very long. So the way that sort of policy and expert discussions now are going are post 1.5%. What happens when, if, as we have done, breach 1.5 global heating, and what then?
Hmm.
So there's questions of how do we begin to cope? How do we adapt? So
Yeah.
the discussions are all now around adaptation, about coping.
Yes.
Clearly, energy is absolutely key.
Yeah.
We must, if we want to live,
Hmm.
we must stop fossil fuel. I mean, we don't have an alternative.
Yeah.
There is
We can't live side by side like keeping fossil fuel and live healthy on this planet. It's not an option. It's not a possibility anymore.
it's impossible. It simply can't happen. Which is why when one looks at the American administration, one wonders what's going on. But then, I mean, there's always been swings and roundabouts, and we've seen these kinds of people come and go.
Mhm.
We've seen we've seen what's happened to the Berlin Wall, or we've
Yeah.
seen what happened to apartheid, or
True.
we've seen what happened in the Second World War.
Yeah.
So we've seen what happened to Mussolini.
Mhm.
So these kinds of ways of doing things, okay, they don't last,
Yeah.
and they largely don't last because generally they make people unhappy.
Yeah.
They don't bring happiness. They don't bring joy. They don't bring prosperity. They don't bring security.
Yeah.
Uh, they don't bring ease.
Yeah.
They don't bring about feeling safe with one's family.
Mhm.
So it's actually easier if one sort of thinks about making life easy.
Mhm.
It's easier
Yeah.
actually to be, you know, happy, as it
Yeah.
were. If not happy,
Absolutely.
I mean, happy is subjective.
Yeah.
It's easier to be content. It's easier to be
Not worried about kind of, you know,
exactly not
constantly worried
worried
about.
about. It's
Yeah.
simply easier.
Yeah.
It's simply easier. So
Absolutely.
to that extent, one can kind of predict that despite where we are, I mean, it will get worse before it
Yeah.
gets better.
Yeah.
Right
Absolutely.
for where we are, one can look into the future in terms of the renewable evolution. One can look into the future in terms of the way that the good things are happening in our world.
Yeah.
And not a question about being optimistic. It's a question about being realist. We have challenges. There are problems. There will always be problems. The only question is how you respond to those
Yeah.
problems.
Absolutely. And sometimes those problems feel like this it's overwhelming, but it's gonna go down. It's not a constant thing. It's the constant is only the change. It's gonna change eventually at some point. It's just we are in a turbulent time. And it will go away. So I think that's good hope. That's a good message. Good segue to call this episode to an end. So thank you so much, Dr. Paul Dorfman. Again, it was a pleasure talking to you.